Welcome back to another PCBH Corner. I'm Dr. Bauman.
And I'm Dr. Beachy.
Got an exciting topic that is coming up for us today. And I think this has been something I haven't actually recognized how important of a conversation that this is. And then not only just how important it is about how much it ripples out and is such a foreign concept. It's such a simple concept, such a foreign concept. And that is, how long do visits take? So when you hear me saying that, and really I will say this has been just after a year of trying to think about how do we get PCBH to be uptaken more, how can we really support our BHCs, and really the conversations I've had with you about talking about this, my mind has been like blown a little bit. It's like, oh my gosh, this is something we should be very, very intentional about, because most likely, like most things with PCBH, what we ask BHCs to do is not what we've been trained to do. It's kind of the opposite.
Well, I'm going to be transparent that I think that with us being involved in practicing as a BHC for so long, and that it has gotten to the point where I've kind of forgot. Well,
I know.
You just do what you just.
It's so normal now, right? It's so natural now.
Yeah. So you go into clinic, and yeah, you have some scheduled folks, but you do the best you can to see them. And as warm handoffs come in, you take them, and you might be 18 minutes late, you might be 10 minutes early. The visit takes as long as the visit takes.
And let me pause you there, because I want you to expand upon that, because you say that often. You say that regularly. And obviously I know what you mean by that. But expand upon, what do you mean by the visit takes as long as the visit takes?
Well, the time that I'm spending with a patient is highly contingent upon our ability to come up with a good plan.
Okay.
A plan that I feel good about, patient feels good about, maybe PCP feels good about, so that when they're leaving, you did that whole thing on reverse engineering of how you want a patient to feel when they leave the room with you.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you're going to base upon once you get to that point where it's like, all right, we know what we're going to do. I know what we're asking. I actually write it down in this the summary visit.
Yeah.
And I go and I print it out, and it's like, we're good. And so sometimes that takes 17 minutes. Sometimes that takes 24 minutes. Sometimes it takes 52 minutes. You don't quite know.
And what's interesting about that is not often how we're trained as behavioral health providers, right? That what kind of signals the end of the visit is usually time, right? That it's usually time. Almost like, and I know you used this metaphor before, it's almost like when you go to get a massage, right? How you know the massage is done is based on time, where what you're actually saying more is that how you know the visit is done is based on, do we have a plan? Are we good with that plan? And do we feel like we are done?
Right. And this is where it gets crazy. Because if you think about it, and this is what I was saying in the very beginning of the PCBH Corner, is that you and I have been steeped in the BHC world for so long.
Yeah.
But if you think back to our mental health counseling degree and part of our clinical psychology degree, with time, what did they say? This is a boundary. This is the way to show respect.
Correct.
This is everything. This is the way
Right.
to demonstrate to the patient how much you care about them and how much you care about yourself.
Well,
and you got to stay healthy for them and blah blah blah. And it's you started exactly. If you have a 3:00 appointment, you're there between 2:59 and maybe 3:00 and 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then if it goes 45 to 50 minutes. You have maybe a 5-minute window. You can stop at 3:45, maybe 3:50. But if you go to 3:53, you had poor boundaries.
Well, what's interesting about it is that I remember the first time I saw this happening. It was during our postdoc, and I was shadowing Kirk, and he had a follow-up visit with a patient, and they came in, and patient's like, they checked in on goals. Patient's like, I'm doing really well. I'm doing great. It was probably like a 7 or 8 minute visit, and Kirk was like, okay. Well, follow up when you need us. We're here. Follow up as needed. And I remember sitting there thinking, it's like, man, this is different. Like,
right.
And I automatically thought, that's the way a primary care provider does it.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Is the reason why we think that this is normal is because we've been steeped in primary care. So all the shadowing that we've done, whenever we do co-visits and we're seeing what happens with PCPs, they go in very focused. So shout out for focused acceptance and commitment therapy, which we were largely also steeped in. But they go in very focused. And they're running through and they get through their plan. And when the plan is done and the patient feels good about it as well, then okay, so when are we going to have you come back? And so this is really natural cadence
and we
happens.
shadow PCPs all the time. And
Right.
that is what the cadence is, right? That it's not
absolutely.
dependent on time. And like you were saying as well before, that our visits might take 11 minutes, 17 minutes, 25, some maybe 52. That's also reflective of what PCPs do. Even if they have 15 to 20 minute scheduled appointments,
Right.
they might take 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes at times when things
And
are
they don't blow up their schedule. If they're having once every 15-minute visits, and that's how their schedule is, they might have an 8-minute visit, and they might have a 42-minute visit. They don't then go change all their schedules. So that's just another thing for us to consider.
And I think that's a really big point about how this ripples out in some ways, right? Like if we are continuing to be that time dependent, rather than, I don't know what the word would be, maybe like quality dependent or whatever.
Cadence of primary care dependent?
Whatever, but if we're more time dependent, we do start to think about like, oh, this is initial visit, so it needs to be 45 minutes, right?
And this is a crisis, so a crisis visit, so this needs to be 45 minutes or an hour.
Right.
Or, oh, this is a quick follow-up. This needs to be 15.
And if we get into those
Or 30.
visits where it's like, oh, we feel like we're good, but it's only minute 16, it's like, man, I gotta extend this out to like 14 more minutes to get because the thing was scheduled for 30 minutes. So we have to,
right.
And then we're not as available. We see that ripple out. We're not as available for handoffs or. Yeah.
Because imagine if you are married to, it was a 30-minute visit, I have to do 30 minutes, right? And so you're at minute 18, and the patient's like, hey, this is a really great plan.
Checking their watch, like.
And then a warm handoff comes in. Maybe that warm handoff came in at minute 16. Oh, I'm going to be 15 minutes because there's a 30-minute. You're less and less and less available. And so I think that it makes more sense to go on the cadence of primary care.
Yeah.
Which I think is fair. You know, as we're saying all this, how much more simple is it if you think about it to be like, okay, I've been scheduled a 30-minute appointment, so I go 30 minutes. So I guess, long story short, I have a lot of empathy for new BHCs. I understand that what we're saying might be clear as mud. I promise you, if you stick with the system, the nuances and the more experience you get, it will make sense.
Last thing I wanted to say about it, and what's interesting as well, is because sometimes we also get this conversation, but what about billing codes? What's really great about our billing codes, while I'm not a huge fan of our billing codes that we use, I wish they had more flexibility, inherent in such a things like 90832, psychotherapy 30 minutes, is the visit length between 16 minutes up until 37 minutes. So even in our codes that we're using, that, again, I think we probably should do better at and change some, there's inherent flexibility. 90791s don't have a time parameter to them. You know, it's just based on what's done in the visit. And that's where moving away from that time dependence and more towards primary care dependence,
And then,
whatever we call it.
And we've actually created in our system a dummy code so that you can put an encounter.
Right.
If it is a clinically meaningful encounter where you assess something and there was some type of intervention and some type of plan, but maybe it went 8 minutes. We want to be able to still capture that
Correct.
this was a clinical encounter. We want to chart and document it. It just won't get billed through. But that's not because we're intentionally going 8 minutes. It's because the patient had what they needed and they said, I'm good.
Again, rather than time dependent, primary care dependent.
Absolutely.
I like that. So let us know any thoughts and questions that anybody
There's
has.
going to be a lot more questions.
You know, and I think that's the point, though, is that the grace and the gratitude that we have for everybody, and that these are really interesting conversations that oftentimes don't reflect how we were trained. So, you know, thank you for joining us. Any final thoughts? Anywhere your mind's going?
I don't know.
Yeah. Hopefully it's a good one. All right.